In 2006, jealousy and lies sparked one of the UK's most shocking arson attacks. 2 lives were lost, and 16-year-old Lucy Cochrane was left fighting for hers. It all began with a jealous teen's lies and false accusations, claims that would spiral out of control, drawing her parents into a plan that ended in tragedy and devastation. "16-year-old Lucy Cochrane lived in Wythenshawe, Manchester, with her parents Maureen and Alex and their dog Buster. Lucy had learning difficulties, but like most teens, she just wanted a normal life. She was especially close to her mum Maureen, and their bond was incredibly strong. For years, Lucy attended Newell Green School with classmate Natalie Connor. Teachers recall Lucy as pleasant but vulnerable, and she was generally really well liked by her peers. But this popularity seemed to spark jealousy in Natalie. And I'm just going to say Natalie Connor is vile. You'll see exactly what I mean as we go further through this video, but she was disgusting. Natalie started bullying Lucy, both verbally and physically, targeting her red hair and learning difficulties. Lucy would often hide in the toilets, fearful of her tormentor, and to escape any form of confrontation. But Natalie had another side to the story. She would bully Lucy and then portray herself as the victim. In one incident during a music lesson, Lucy was simply dancing with another pupil when Natalie jumped in and claimed that Lucy had assaulted her, allegedly breaking her ribs. Police even arrested Lucy, took her fingerprints and interviewed her. But it didn't take all that long for them to realise that the story was completely fabricated. There were no broken ribs, as Lucy hadn't hurt Natalie at all. Natalie's obsessive hatred for Lucy developed into a campaign of harassment for 18 long months. And it wasn't just at school either. Natalie told her parents that Lucy was bullying her, and they believed every word. Her parents, Michael and Jane Connor, who were separated, didn't just take her side. They actively joined in with the harassment, targeting the entire Cochrane family. Maureen and Alex repeatedly filed complaints with the police about the Connor family, desperate to not only protect themselves, but also their daughter. But very little was ever done. What had begun as insults quickly escalated into false allegations from Natalie, all of which were supported by her mum. On one occasion, Michael, who was a heavy drinker, even told the staff, "If the school doesn't get this bullying sorted out, then I will sort out the kids and the parents." This was all while their daughter, Natalie, was the true bully, and clearly a massive manipulator. Over these 18 months, the Cochrane family faced increasing harassment. Their car ended up damaged, and just 5 days before the fatal incident, Maureen contacted police after discovering what appeared to be a flammable liquid poured all over their front door, as well as a tree in their garden that had been partially uprooted. Shockingly though, no officers ever came to inspect the liquid. There was no samples taken, and no questions were ever asked. Officers had the view that if there was no witnesses, there was very little that could be done. Although they did promise to install CCTV cameras. That action, however, never happened. And tragically, by the time it might have, it was already too little, too late. On the 11th of January 2006, Michael, Jane and Natalie Connor were spotted in the Wendover pub in Wythenshawe at around lunchtime. It was there that, according to court evidence, they began plotting their horrific plan. By mid-afternoon at around 3 p.m, they visited a local Tesco and purchased a petrol can along with £3 worth of petrol, a purchase that the court later described as suspicious, given that none of them owned a car. Michael and Jane stayed at the pub until late that night, leaving at around 11 p.m. As he departed, Michael reportedly told another man, "I've got business to go see, and it must be done tonight." It was 12:30 a.m. on the 12th of January 2006, and the entire Cochrane family was asleep when their fire alarm suddenly blared. Flames and smoke quickly filled the house, making it almost impossible to see or breathe. Maureen managed to make a desperate 999 call before tragically being overcome by fumes. In a voice filled with panic, she said, "Somebody set the front door on fire, and we can't get out. Can you hurry up? Please just come." In the background of Maureen's call, their dog Buster, a black Patterdale Terrier, could be heard barking frantically, while Alex desperately tried to smash a window in an attempt to escape. A haunting detail that we'll return to in just a moment. Just minutes before this, Michael Connor had poured 2 litres of petrol through the Cochrane letterbox and set the house alight. Within minutes, a vortex of flames engulfed the hallway. Forensic experts later estimated temperatures reached around 1,000 degrees Celsius, intense enough that the plaster literally peeled away from the walls. Michael and Jane had waited outside the house that night until they were certain the family was in bed. Then Michael put their horrific plan into action, while Jane stood watch. Shockingly, witnesses later recalled seeing Michael return to the burning house 3 or 4 times with a beer in his hand, said to be surveying his handiwork. So let's return to the window that we'd briefly touched upon before. In a desperate need for air, Alex smashed his bedroom window, a heroic action that, unbeknownst to him, would ultimately save his daughter's life. During the trial, a scientist and fire expert explained how this action created what's known as a chimney effect. By breaking the window, the flames were drawn towards the fresh oxygen, rushing into Maureen and Alex's bedroom. It ultimately pulled the fire away from Lucy's room, sparing her. But at the same time, it tragically sealed Alex and Maureen's fate. Maureen, who was 45, was found on her bed severely burned and was pronounced dead at the scene. Alex, who was 54 at the time, managed to escape the house, but his injuries were catastrophic. He fought for 3 days in hospital before succumbing to his burns and smoke inhalation. Lucy was discovered unconscious under her bed, but she was in critical condition, with extensive 3rd-degree burns. Against all odds, though, she survived. But survival came at an unimaginable cost. Her parents were gone, her home was destroyed, even the family dog Buster, whose frantic barking could be heard during the 999 call, sadly did not make it out alive. The Cochrane's home, once filled with warmth and family life, had become a scene of devastation within minutes. At just 16 years old, Lucy had lost her parents, her home, and her beloved pet, everything she'd lived for, all because of the lies of a jealous teenager and the actions of her moronic parents. Lucy's brother David had the heartbreaking task of telling her that their parents had passed away. It was devastating news that left her bewildered and traumatised for months. Struggling to process the loss, Lucy would repeatedly write the same words in her school notebooks and on classroom whiteboards. They read, "I miss my mum and dad, and Buster, my dog." Meanwhile, the police investigation quickly turned towards the Connors. As we'd already mentioned, witnesses had seen Michael just minutes before and minutes after the fire, and soon Michael, Jane and Natalie were all arrested. Detectives also questioned Cheryl Coombs, Michael's girlfriend at the time. She had picked him up that night after the fire and immediately noticed that he absolutely reeked of petrol. He was carrying a black bin bag with the petrol can inside, and when Cheryl asked about it, Michael told her that Jane had asked him to sort out a family who had been causing trouble, insisting that he was only protecting his own. He admitted that he hadn't planned to tell her, but that the problem had now been dealt with. Cheryl recalled that Michael was bladdered, or severely drunk if you're not familiar with UK slang. This was because Jane had plied him with drink at the pub earlier that day to build up the courage to actually follow through with the plan. Michael had said, "I regret what I've done. I never meant to harm anybody or kill anybody. I just meant to scare them so they would leave my family alone." The 3 were sentenced at Manchester Crown Court, where it was heard how Natalie's lies claiming that Lucy was bullying her were the spark that sent the entire tragedy in motion. Although she didn't pour the petrol herself, her fabrications and involvement in the campaign against Lucy and her family made her directly responsible for what happened. Parents Jane and Michael Connor, both 40 at the time, were found guilty of 2 counts of murder, arson with the intent to endanger life, and conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. They were each sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 32 years before being eligible for parole. Natalie, who was 18 at the time of sentencing, was found guilty of 2 counts of manslaughter, grievous bodily harm, and arson with intent to endanger life. She was sentenced to 11 years in prison. Jane's mum, Margaret Robinson, also faced charges after trying to cover up what her daughter and son-in-law had done. She was convicted of perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 18 months in prison. The sickening thing is, though, Natalie didn't serve her full 11 years in prison. She was released after only serving half of her time. This alone infuriated Lucy's family. But then came her Facebook posts. In one, she wrote, "Mum, I need you loads. Wish you was here to give me a cuddle and tell me you love me." And in another, "I haven't been this ill in ages. I want my mum so I can have a cuddle off her to make me better." But for Lucy's family, those words felt like a slap in the face. Obviously, one day, Natalie will be able to see her mum again. But Lucy, who had lost hers so violently, and due to Natalie's sheer jealousy, would never get that chance again. Lucy's grandparents were also furious with police, and rightfully so. An inquiry later revealed a series of blunders leading up to the tragedy, with the report stating that the family had been victims of individual and systemic failings. Over the course of the 18 months, the Cochranes had filed an inch-thick stack of complaints of harassment from the Connors. Yet police repeatedly failed to act. They ignored letters that the family wrote, and as we'd already mentioned, they never followed up on the attempted arson attack just 5 days before the fire. No samples had ever been taken and no investigation carried out. It just makes you wonder what other opportunities were missed. The Cochrane family firmly believe that had police taken those complaints seriously, Maureen and Alex would still be alive today. In a statement, the family said, "Maureen and Alex were lovely, gentle people who would not, indeed could not, harm anyone. They would not retaliate even under provocation, as everyone now knows." After the tragedy, Lucy went to live with her uncle and try to rebuild her life. By 2013, at the age of 22, she was reportedly working in a care home and volunteering at 2 charity shops, doing her very best to live as normal as possible after surviving such an unimaginable trauma. It's chilling to think how just one person's jealousy could spiral into such hatred. Hatred strong enough to brainwash others and ultimately destroy lives. It would also be interesting to know what Michael and Jane's reactions were when they discovered that their actions were based on nothing but their daughter's lies. Let me know in the comments what you think about this case. Should Natalie have been released early, or should she have received much longer than 11 years?